One of the biggest sort of challenges of the career of a researcher or a scientist is to the degree to which that there is often a lot of mystery and ambiguity around it, and how much that the general public just often gets wrong in terms of the perceptions of what we actually do. And it's often challenging when you hear reporters or commenters talking about science in a certain way, and that when you're in it, it does not work that way at all. And it's even challenging within different domains. They're very different in how they operate in the scientific way in terms of how they are organized. If you start looking at it, there's actually a fair bit of literature on this at this moment, that there is this sort of nuance that happens across different domains that are um, quite different in how they operate. But just in the public domain, how people see what we actually do is striking, and that always is. It's striking as somebody that's actually in it in terms of what we actually do and sort of perceptions. And that boils down to, or that sort of triculates, or I don't know what the word is, but it sort of passes to policymakers and government analysts, and they just are so often all the time because of the misperceptions of this. I was listening to, it's a really good science show. I'm not going to sort of out it, because they're doing their best, and I understand, and it sort of popularizes science, so it's kind of good that way. But at the end of the show, they talk about how many citations that they include, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, that is the most meaningless thing I've ever heard in terms of what this actually means. If more citations doesn't mean it's actually better science in any sort of way. Um, and it's one of these things that's you know, even within the domain of the fields that you're in, there's often sort of debate in terms of what you're doing. But in my view, and of course, I think my view is always right. But in my view, the if you start looking at research papers, there's often not a lot of citations and stuff that's actually really done very well. Um, and what you find out when you actually write a research article, the number of citations is a big judgment call, and it's often dictated by a lot of different things. I like to err on having a very large breadth of citations because it helps you get through, just in case there's somebody that you missed. Um, and, part of the way that you get through science is making sure that everybody gets the credit that they deserve. And you just want to capture as much. That's why I think about breadth a lot, um, in terms of covering. So it's not the number that actually matters often, it's the breadth. But then, it's also the depth and the sort of nuance that you have, and sort of going down and thinking about a particular topic that is really important. In fact, you could probably get away with, but nobody's going to allow you to get away with that. It's like have one citation in your entire paper, your entire research. And if it's building on something very well, I don't know, like it's just kind of this weird norm that's developed where citations like matters. But when you're actually doing it, you realize it doesn't matter as much in terms of what you're doing. And yes, your ideas are informed by many different things. Um, but at the same time, there is a lot of repeated ideas that come up all of the time. So, the challenge that I come back to is that there's just a lot of misnomers in terms of how people handle or understand science. And one of the ones that comes out is like that actually, like that number of how many citations you have in a paper, um, actually matters. It doesn't. It really, really doesn't. Or, the thing that you're actually reporting on, it really doesn't. What matters is like, did you go into depth and nuance and, look at the world in a different way than what was done before? This is a lot different, um, than the sort of, let's just cover as much as, or let's just, it's not necessarily breadth, but let's just, go and, look at all of the work in this particular area. You'll realize that there's just a lot of really terrible science that's quite easy to identify. One of the things that's been cool with the reciprocity project that I just built out is this sort of checking, or this game where you can look at abstracts and you quickly realize, even my 13-year-old knew right away and was like, oh, that's not very good, scientific research right there. And that one is. You clearly see it extraordinarily quickly, um, when you get exposed to that there is these big differences in what research actually is, and how well it's actually done. And unless you actually do it and you're part of it, you don't realize how big the differences actually are, right? Until you actually get exposed. And people have this sort of simplistic view that all science is good science. It's really not. There's big differences across the board in terms of what scientific effort is, even within domains. I think we all try to make it good, but there's differences. There's different styles. There's different strategies. There's all these sort of nuance, um, that exists. There's even, people talk about, paper mills and things like that. And I think it's going to get extraordinarily worse with artificial intelligence. Some of us are a little bit worried about that. But, all of this is to come down to is I think we need to have, there's two things I think there's three things I think we need to stress more, but it's very difficult to do because these are really boring topics and people don't like boring things. They very much just check out right away. First thing is a better understanding of probability in this world is extraordinarily important, because that feeds into the understanding of probability, feeds into how science actually gets done. A better understanding of science. So that's the second thing in terms of like what it means, how do you do it? And it's just really, really poorly understood, even within, how we teach it in high school. We teach things as facts. Um, and anybody that's worth their weight in research and science are going to say that facts are really difficult to come by. Like something that is really, really like clear cut, and this thing is a true fact. It's extraordinarily difficult to come by in a probabilistic world, in a world that, it is just, there's a lot of uncertainty that exists with almost everything. There's more uncertainty and more complexity than there is often of like facts and like concrete knowledge. The third thing I think is really important, and it sort of relates, sort of indirectly, is financial understanding and financial literacy. We always need more. People are really off in terms of financial literacy, and it all sort of feeds in. All of these things kind of feed into each other, um, and it collectively really does. Once you understand some of these things, um, there's a lot more clarity. And the thing is you will never know everything, and there'll never be a clear, definitive answer. That's a sort of probabilistic way of thinking about things. But you need to understand that things grow exponentially. That's a financial way of thinking about things. But also, how to build on science and how to interpret it, in a way so it actually makes sense. All of those three things, I think, will greatly aid in our understanding. All right. Take care. Have a wonderful day.